Hi, I'm James Johnson, founder and CEO coach. Welcome to Peer Effect, the podcast where your peers will tell you what's unlocking their 10 million plus business. Choosing the right co-founder is hard but essential, and maintaining that relationship takes focus. My guest today, Fabien Koutchekian, is the co-founder and CEO of Genomines. They are a biotechnology company pioneering plant-based metal extraction. They recently did a 45 million Series A and have 30 people across France and South Africa. This is the episode for you if you want to learn about how to make it work with your co-founder. Fabien, welcome to the show. So, when we were doing our prep for this, we discovered not only are you running a successful business, you've also had time somehow to write a book. What made you decide to write a book?
Actually, I was studying in Paris. One of my class was about the crisis in the Middle East. And so there was this amazing teacher called Gilles Kepel, but I couldn't attend the class actually because there was no more place. It was an entire amphitheater. I think it was maybe 400, 500 people, but there was no more place because everybody booked so fast because everybody was expecting the class to be extremely interesting. So I couldn't attend it, but actually a friend of mine back then was able to attend it and took notes of the class, gave it to me, and I was like, oh wow, that's super interesting. But I thought that's so complex, it's quite a deep subject that I thought, okay, how could I remember that in a long-lasting way? So I thought, oh, okay, maybe I should write an historical novel about this. And my best friend, Nico, was like, oh, that's super interesting that you're doing that. I want to do that with you. And so he was not studying the same thing with me back then, but we just started thinking, okay, let's write something about that. And it was more like just a project back then. And at some point we were like, hey, maybe we should try to get it published. It was more like a joke than something else. So we sent it to several publishing houses. And eventually one of them called L'Harmattan in France, it's the fifth largest publishing house, said, yeah, I want to publish it. Of course, initially we thought it was a joke, but actually we just published it with them. I don't know, it was just very random for us, but we liked it. Of course, we didn't have a huge success as you might expect. It was just amateur writer, and back then when I look back at this book and I read it, I'm like, my God, yeah, I'm sure I can write better now. However, I think something important to mention is that it was a pre-ChatGPT era. So I think writing a book now would be significantly simpler than back then. Yeah, it was a funny project. What's
interesting to even when you were a student, you were looking to collaborate and build things. That's quite impressive. You managed to even get it to be published by a proper publishing house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you get from courses, writing books, to where you are today? What's your origin story?
So initially, I'm a mining engineer. Then I studied political sciences in Sciences Po. And so that's when I had these classes about the crisis in the Middle East, etc. I tried to attend them, didn't manage to attend them actually. After that, I went to do some strategy consulting for 2 years. I think this is quite an interesting job, but to be frank, it was not really for me. So because I wanted to build a company and all, I don't know if it's still the case, but a lot of people told me, like, if you want to build a company and be successful, it's important that you go and you try to be a strategy consultant because you're going to learn a lot of things about how to analyze data, etc. Look, I don't know if that's true. I think there's a lot of different ways of being an entrepreneur, but that was mine, basically. That's what I've done, but not really for me. And eventually, but again, this guy I was discussing about earlier, Nico, my best friend, told me, like, hey, you know what? If you want to be an entrepreneur, maybe be an entrepreneur. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try building something. And actually, I built this first company with two of the co-founders. We were super misaligned. We didn't see the journey the same way at all. So naturally, it failed. After 6 months, I started wondering if this project really for me it just doesn't seem to be the right fit. Our energy is not the right one. We're not really productive, etc. So I figured, okay, maybe I should leave. So after a year, I left and I applied to a program that's called Entrepreneurs First in France. So initially it's a British program, No, it's a bit everywhere in the world. And it's not the case anymore. Now they're doing only AI, I think, almost, and they're just shipping a lot of projects to the US. But in the past, they had a real, I would say, a real presence in France, in Paris. So I went there, and the approach of these programs, the methodology of these programs, is that they put together people that are very different, with very different background. So most of the time you have half of the cohort that is, I would say, that has training of researchers, for instance, quite heavy, quite deep in terms of science. The other part is more like business. I guess I would not fit in a very specific category because I was both an engineer, I would say, and kind of a bit of a business background. And I met my co-founder. She's a doctor in plant biotechnology. She's super impressive. She basically studied how to transform plants. So when we met, we started discussing about problems. So we started discussing about, okay, what do you think are the big challenges of our era? So we discussed about a lot of things. We discussed about obesity. We discussed about mental sickness, about integration of people, about immigration. And then we discussed as well about the fact that our societies, they need a lot of metals to do a lot of things, to move. For instance, if you want to produce a car, if you want to produce a train, whatever, you need a lot of metal as a raw material to produce things. The problem is that producing these metals is it's quite polluting. It's very expensive right now. It's very energy intensive. But we desperately need them to transition. So basically to reach a point where we're using technologies to produce energy, to store energy that are emitting less carbon than what we're doing today by, for instance, burning coal to produce energy. And that's just an example. And so we discussed about that, and we figured, okay, how could we, I would say, find a way to extract these metals that would be less impacting for the environment, it would be potentially cheaper, and that would be nature-based, inspired by nature. And so we started researching stuff, etc. And I asked her, okay, what do you know about the mining industry? And I'll tell you what I know about plants. The only thing I know about plants back then is that I worked briefly in the mining industry, but very briefly. Again, it was not for me. It was before the strategy consulting. And one thing I observed is that on open pit mines, sometimes you have plants that are managing to survive, to grow. And so I shared that with her. I'm basically saying, oh, I observed that. And actually, she worked on a specific type of plants that we call hyperaccumulators that have this fascinating ability of being able to extract metal from the soil. So the way it works is that the metal is in a bioavailable form. So either it's because it has rained, for instance, and the rain has an acidic effect on the soil, or the plant is producing secondary metabolites, or there can be many mechanisms that are transforming a metal that is not bioavailable into a bioavailable form. The plant absorbs the metal afterwards. It's being uptaken a bit everywhere in the biomass of the plant. And so we figured, okay, maybe we could extract metal profitably using this technique. And so we started working on that, on genetically enhancing plants, filed patents, and so on. So now it's been 5 years we are doing that. We're a team of a bit more than 30 people, divided between a bit more than 20 people in France, a bit more than 10 people in South Africa. And what we're trying to prove at the moment is that, so we've proven at seed stage that it was possible to do that. So we had the early field tests, we've done it in lab as well. And so we've done the entire cycle from the metal that you have in the soil down to you've processed the biomass of the plant and you recovered nickel at the right purity level. So we've done the entire cycle, I would say. Now what we're trying to prove that it can be significantly cheaper than the rest of the industry. So that's where we stand, I would say, at the moment.
Wow. It sounds like a very cool technology. Unfortunately, this is not a technology podcast, so I'm not going to be able to dive into the technology behind it. But what I am quite interested in is this. It seems like you had very different experiences in terms of co-founders. And that's the thing we were particularly going to talk about today is you had one experience where you went down the wrong path, and had one experience you've very much gone down the right path. And I'm wondering if you could share how you might recognize, firstly, if you are going down the wrong path, and secondly, how you then identify the right co-founder.
I think it's very difficult, first of all. So I'm approaching that with a lot of humility. I can't guarantee you that if I was to, I'm very happy with my co-founder, but if I was to build a company in the future, the first thing I would do would be to ask her if she would be willing to build again a company with me, because that's so rare and difficult to find the right co-founder, because you need to be in the right mindset. You need to want to build a company. It's very demanding. It's very stressful. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of money that's at stake as well. I think it's important to mention that. And it's becoming very personal. I used to joke about my co-founder as being my work wife, basically. So I have a fiancé in my private life, and I have a work wife with my co-founder. So you get to spend an enormous amount of time together. This is very demanding. I think the first thing is that for people that are listening to us right now, there are, I would say, a questionnaire that exists. You can just type this in on Google and ask for, a list of questions you need to ask your co-founder. And basically you compare your answer. There's no right or wrong answer. You just need to make sure that there's nothing that is diverging too much. For instance, for us, we were not afraid of the fact that we would have to build a company for quite some time. Okay. It's what we're doing. It's requiring a lot of effort, a lot of time. If you think about it, you develop your project over a long, I would say, timeline, because genetically enhancing a plant, getting all the authorization, etc., it takes time. And then developing a project takes a lot of time as well. So I think you need to reckon that you have to be ready to be working in the long run. So if, for instance, one of us would have wanted to exit after 2 years or 3 years or whatsoever, that would have been a big problem. And I think that's fine. It's not good or bad. It's just a question of knowing yourself. In our cohort at Entrepreneur First, I remember there was 2 very successful guys that I still know that are building something in crypto. And they're already making enormous amount of revenue. They don't need to depend that much on external money, etc. It's like super impressive what they've done. And it's a path that is very different than ours, where I would say it's a path where you're seeing, I would say, more revenue quicker. You have different metrics, you have different timelines. So I would say that's something that's amazing, because they knew it was important for them. It was a different approach. It's different profile, and I think that's completely fine. Just a question of knowing exactly what you want to do. Another type of things is, so there's an implication of the timeline of your project, how quickly you can exit. There's some others that are about, I would say, personality. It's very important to understand that you prefer to work like this or like this. It's when you work in biotechnology, you have to accept to be in transportation, because the lab is not in the center of Paris, right? It's not in the first suburb or whatever. It doesn't work like that. It's slightly outside of Paris. And I think it's very important to recognize that and to be willing to spend some time in the public transportation. You have something, and some people, for them, it's unthinkable. They have to spend time in Paris, etc. And they want to travel by bike, etc. And that's completely okay. It can be very simple things like this, but I think asking the right question at the very beginning on what is okay for you, what's not okay for you, how do you want to work? For us, we are exposed to developing countries as well. We're working in South Africa. We have an entire team there. I think you have to be willing to take the plane, go there, check what's happening, and you have the problem that are tied to the countries where you're working. You can have problems in South Africa that I don't think you would have in France or the US, for instance. So I'm not making generalization, but all of these little details, initially when you start working and you start working on a startup, very often you're very optimistic. And for us, that was that. Paradoxically, I think if I had to launch a company right now, we were trying to do something extremely difficult. It's like a first founder company where like you're a bit naive, and then you go and you do that. And it's fun, it's very exciting what we're doing, etc. But at the same time, it's also very hard. So yeah, you have all of these kind of things.
So you were saying, when you start, you can do a certain amount of kind of preparation in terms of, are you aligned on business plan? Are you aligned on how you're going to work? Are you aligned on timescale? But as you say, there's so much stuff that you don't know. And almost if you did know, you may not even start. How do you spend time remaining aligned on this journey? So you were doing it together for 5 years. Sounds like it's a very happy sort of partnership. You were clear you were aligned when you start. How are you checking in on that alignment on that journey?
A lot of conversations. We're spending a lot of time together. I'm at the lab right now. So I don't think there's a secret sauce. Sometimes you disagree, and I think it's very healthy. I think we got to a point where sometimes you get into fights. Huh? I think it's important to mention that. It's been a long time I've not gotten into a fight with my co-founder, because I think with time as well, you learn how to disagree in a constructive manner. And please don't tell her that, but she's very often right. So it's making things simpler. But yeah, no, I think I don't think that's a secret sauce, unfortunately. You have to work. It's exactly like in a relationship. You have to work on it, and not everything is perfect, and sometimes it's hard. And so when we were raising funds, it was paradoxically with my co-founder, I think a very positive signal I can see, and I think it's an early detection you should have, is that the fact is that the more complicated things are becoming, the closer we are. And so when it's under stress, under a lot of pressure, we're not criticizing each other whatsoever. We are trying to find solutions. And for me, that's very positive. We've always been like that, and we're trying to be very productive, I would say, and to find solutions. Because I think if you want to become an entrepreneur, you have to like solving problems and having problems. You're having problems. And basically my role is to spend time solving issues. And I think I like that. Deep down, I like that. Some days you're like, damn, oh my God. But at the same time, I think deep down, I really like it. Because they're definitely easier. I'm sure I could do something way easier than what I'm doing at the moment. But I really like what I'm doing.
I think often, though, the challenge for founders as they scale is that there's the kind of adrenaline of the problem solving, the firefighting, being in the details. And then as you start scaling, you're just a bit more like you build your management team, you're detached from it. You're still solving problems, but the problem change and you're less directly doing it. And for quite a few founders, that can remove some of what they enjoy the most out of their role. Have you experienced that at all as you've scaled?
Yes, of course. Of course, in the sense that you're getting different problems. And most of the time, you're getting problems you've not anticipated, which makes the job quite stimulating. And that's true when you get to have people that are more experienced than you. For instance, I can't disclose the name, but we're going to recruit very soon. I think we'll announce it probably next month or so. A professional from a big tech company that spent 25 years in HR in this company, because for us it's very important to bet on the people we have and the people we'll have in the future. And that's true that when you get these people that are older than you, way more experienced or whatsoever, they know how to handle most of the challenges that you're facing. But then you have other challenges because you need to handle these people that have way more experience than you. Okay, so it's slightly, the dynamic is changing. Now you're being challenged by people challenges.
Yeah,
and I think this type of, you need to approach that with a lot of humility, because most of the people I'm managing, I'm like, I would say, I can be critical towards what they present to me or whatsoever. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell them how they should do their job. And frankly, they're doing it very well. Yeah. So it's a bit different. But you need to inspire, you need to challenge, you need to solve interdepartmental issues. Because you're working in a very high pressure environment. So it's only natural that people sometimes disagree. And they disagree for the right reason. And that's the most important for me. I don't have any problem that people disagree or whatsoever or challenging each other, because at the end of the day, earlier we had a workshop and we all want the same thing. We disagree how to get there, but we all want the same thing. So that's also very rich, because it's sometimes you have this realization or where you have very smart people literally around the table, and you feel lucky to be in this very stimulating environment, debating ideas. You don't debate people, you debate ideas, you debate strategies. And that's very rich, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to achieve right now, nobody has done before. So there are things we'll get right, there are things we'll get wrong, but at the end of the day, it's not really important. It's what, at the end of the day, for us, what's important is to succeed and actually to find the best way to do this. But nobody can have the pretension to say, okay, I'm right. It doesn't work like this.
Yeah. What strikes you then, that particularly for your business, where you say there is no answer, there's no path to follow. Like you're doing it for the first time, both as founders, but also just the technology and everything else. It feels like you need to have that discussion, creative conflict. But I feel like the co-founder relationship is therefore even more important because if you guys are really aligned, it creates a level of safety within the organization where people can probably discuss a bit harder, discuss a bit more because there's no like power struggle going on at the top. There's connection, which probably leads to better outcomes. So I wonder whether that's true.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's, with my co-founder, we call that the unified front. We are always a unified front. I would never, for instance, I might disagree with her sometimes, but I would not do that publicly. It's like we'll discuss about the change ideas or whatever, but if she says something, this is us saying that, basically. So I think it's very important is that, and she's doing the same for me. So I think this co-founder relationship is extremely important. You need to establish rules as well. And you're learning as time passes by. At the beginning, you don't really know, but sometimes you're like, I wish I would have known that way before, for instance, but you're just learning. Because I think early on, it's very important to spend a lot of time with your co-founder, spending time understanding the way this person works and what are the triggers for this person, what this person like, doesn't, etc., etc.
As a coach, you see a lot of co-founder relationships where they get external support to still, like, at its most extreme version, mediate. But hopefully it happens earlier, just that relationship development. Because as you say, like, one thing I've experienced when I was a founder is you can become quite work focused and actually you can neglect the relationship part because you become very, we need to solve this, but actually it's really important to keep on nourishing that relationship. So I'm curious for you guys, you said you spent much time at the beginning. Do you make a separate effort on relationship as well, or is it always within just work context?
No, not necessarily. It's because it's such an intense job. You get to talk about a lot of things because when you're an entrepreneur, we are working so much that there's a lot of permeability between your private life and your personal life. It's just when you're working every day, Saturdays, Sundays included at some point, you get to talk about a lot of things. So naturally, you develop the relationship on this and you start to anticipate as well what the person needs, because that's also very important.
Yeah. And so from your set of experience before, if you were to compare, so a lot of people listening will have a co-founder relationship, probably. There are many more co-founders than there are solo founders. Not everyone meets their perfect match and then continues to develop that. If for people listening who they've got to size, they've been their co-founder for 3 to 5 years, what might you suggest that works for you in terms of things to avoid that you've seen when it didn't work for you before, and things to really nail that really help you build that co-founder and protect that co-founder relationship?
I think it's important not to make too much assumption. Rather, if you can ask your co-founder whatever, just ask directly. Give this person a call, talk to this person directly, message this person. I would say it's better to avoid writing messages because there can be easily some misunderstanding by message. It depends on the state of mind of the person that's receiving the message. It depends on the state of mind of the person that's sending it. There can be many things that are like misleading. So I would say it's better to have a direct interaction. That's my view. What else? Let me see. For me, it's difficult to imagine because it's going well, but I have some examples around me of friends that have built companies and basically the co-founders relationship have gone terribly wrong. And that's very difficult. But I think by talking to both of them, I can tell that they could have stopped. They could have stopped the relationship long time before. And I think sometimes people are avoiding doing the right thing, but deep down they know that it's not working. For me, that's not the case. Deep down, I know it's working. And that's making things easier, I would say. But yeah, I also think that sometimes I'm seeing some founders actually building companies alone. I must say, like, if some of them like are listening to me, I must show my profound respect to them because it's very impressive. I'm not sure I would be able to do that alone. I'm almost sure I wouldn't be able to do that alone. I think it's a very lonely journey in this case, and it's very tough. Even less. Very difficult. Very difficult.
But interestingly, it's, I suppose, going back, it is almost like a relationship where sometimes I think being with the wrong co-founder is worse than having no co-founder. And that doesn't necessarily mean they were the wrong co-founder at the beginning, but sometimes the dynamic can not work. But also sometimes people's motivations can change. Like things can happen during life so that the answers might have been aligned in year 1, but by year 5, those answers are no longer aligned. Are they willing to travel? Do they want to do stuff face to face? How long are they willing to wait for personal things change? So I think checking in on that periodically and being quite explicit about it and going, are we still aligned on vision? Are we still aligned on how we're going to do this? Are we still aligned, but our roles is quite important.
I think it's super important. It's a very good idea. To be very frank, we're not doing it in a formalized way. I think we're more doing it like through discussions here and there, but we're not like formalizing that by saying, okay, now we need to assess whether or not we're still aligned. But it's rather, we're discussing about that here and there, but it's not. I think when you're genuinely excited about your project as well, I think something that's driving us is just curiosity. We're so curious to see, because we already know that this is working, but we want to know to what extent is it working? What are we going to be able to do? What are we going to face the challenges, solve them, etc.? It's just super exciting. So we're not really in the mood of saying, okay, what are we going, like big, I would say, orientation in life, or we have to make it working because we're curious. We're just interested in saying, okay, what's going to be tomorrow?
I think what's interesting about doing a check-in at some point is even just reaffirming that you are aligned can be quite helpful, because and even not just for you, but for the team itself. Because I think also as you start scaling, the roles, your role can slightly change as well, like what you're focused on. And just, I think also giving each other permission to do the role that's right for you at that stage of your business is quite helpful. Because I feel that founders end up accumulating all these tasks and responsibilities that actually weigh them down. And you feel there's that founder guilt of, I need to do it because no one else is going to. But actually, is that the stuff that really moves the needle? I think just having that conversation together and going, okay, let's almost spring clean our roles and go, okay, let's see what we can chuck out and either give to someone else or eliminate. And maybe this is not important, I think can be quite freeing as well.
No, I agree with you. It can be a very good idea. Again, to be frank, we're not really formalizing that.
It seems like you guys are pretty busy having just fundraised and, curiously following where the tech takes you. From when you see it before, if you're looking at when a co-founder thing is potentially not working, you made quite an early decision. It was obviously clear to you that it wasn't working. If people are listening, thinking about, is our relationship working at the moment as a co-founder? What are a few sort of warning signs that you would share to watch out for?
I think the first one is productivity. Are you productive or not? If the person is telling you, I'm going to do that and not doing it or not holding deadlines or whatsoever, it's not a really good sign. I think like basic values, honesty, transparency, these kind of things, I think are super, super important. Yeah, these are the challenges I had in with my first company. And now with my company right now, with my co-founder now, it's basically transparency, clarity. We're like in the same boats. It's very different. We're very productive. So yeah. Going from lab to field in our industry, normally it takes 10 years.
Wow.
If you look, it's not a joke. If you look at all, I would say, crops producer, you look at buyer, etc., you'll see it takes a lot of time. And normally to get to a plant that has been genetically enhanced to a field, it's a bit more than 10 years.
Wow.
So if you're not productive, and you can define productivity in a very different manner. For instance, at the beginning of your project, maybe you do a customer discovery or whatsoever. Okay, if you talk to 3 customers per week, there's a problem. If you talk to 10, 50, 20, I don't know. You need to define it, what's an acceptable KPI for you as well, but you can track KPIs that are very simple. It doesn't have to be planting a genetically enhanced plant on field. It can be very simple. but you can track productivity at the very beginning of your co-founder relationship and track whether or not it's working. And if it's not working, it's like, maybe there are reasons to explain it, but if there's none, it's like, maybe it's not the right person for you.
I really like that, how you can like almost define what is some way of tracking productivity, because that is going to differ company to company. For example, like research interviews could be quite a key one for you guys. I'm trying to think of other clients, if they've gone that deep in terms of defining a productivity metric to see the sort of the effectiveness of their partnership.
And for us, we were tracking like this at the beginning. We were just discussing with many groups, with metallurgical groups, etc., and saying, okay, how many are we? What is the percentage we are covering in the market? So, are we talking to? And at the end of the customer discovery, have we discussed with a significant part of the market? We discussed to 40, 50, 60%. We're an industry where it's not, you don't have thousands and thousands of groups. So naturally, you can, if you cover several hundreds, you discussed with almost everybody already. But that's the way we define the metrics. You can have many others. Okay. For instance, I know some very deep tech groups. Sometimes they define it technologically as well by, okay, have they written a white paper or whatsoever? If there's a company I really like, it's called Chipperon, and they were at Entrepreneurs First as well. It's super cool what they are doing. And I know that they are publishing like a white paper very regularly, and that's a very good metrics as well of I would say technological traction. There's no wrong KPI. I think it has to be defined very in a tailored manner to your business. But I think tracking this productivity very early on, it's important. And in any case, over the entire journey of your business, you will track productivity. We are tracking productivity on a weekly basis, and for some tasks on a daily basis. The only thing is that when your team is becoming bigger, you have way more KPI. Especially in a project that has some different sectors, because we have a microbiological sector, we have a genetic sector, we have a sector that is specialized on propagation, we have downstream processing, we have exploration, we have expansion, geology. We have a lot. So naturally, you end up being in a position where you have an inflation of the number of KPI you're tracking. And that's normal. But the thing is that if it's something that can be filled per department, it takes 10 minutes to fill all the KPIs, so people can do it very quickly. And I would say on our side, with my co-founder, we have a way of tracking productivity in a very simple way, I would say, and we can have a quick snapshot of the entire company in a few minutes.
I feel talking to you about how you're tracking productivity, could be a whole another episode in itself. That's definitely something that a lot of founders struggle with. So maybe we'll talk about it again in future. But before we wrap up this, what is one thing, for founders listening, that when it comes to your sort of an effective co-founder relationship, what do you think is one thing that they could do today to either analyze their co-founder relationship or improve it?
I think it depends for how long they've been working together, but one way of looking at it is, of course, we set up OKRs like probably all startups in the world, but basically looking at, okay, have you met your OKRs or not in the past? I think it's super important. I think the second thing that we've not really addressed so far is assessing the complementarity as well. Are you bringing exactly the same skills to the table? Because if that's the case, is it really useful? Or are you bringing, I would say, a complementary set of skills to the table? Would you be able to get some skills with another co-founder instead of this one? I think that's super important. It's always the same. For this type of skill, do you need to pay people to get these skills, or do you have a co-founder that maybe will be less paid at the beginning at least, or will have more equity? All of that, it's just a giant equation, and you have to make it work.
Fabien, thank you so much for sharing so openly, and congratulations on founding what sounds like an amazing co-founder.
Yeah, I'm very lucky. I'm a lucky guy.
Such a good episode today with Fabien. I really liked a suggestion on going on ChatGPT and getting it to suggest some questions to discuss with your co-founder to check on alignment, not just on vision, but also on how you want to work and timeframes. We'll see you next Wednesday for another founder episode. As ever, if any questions, just email us at hello@peer-effect.com or reach out on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening and happy scaling.